Hey everyone, welcome back to another video of mine where today we're going to be solving Leetcode problem 179 titled Largest Number. So we're given a list of non-negative integers nums and we have to arrange them such that they actually form the largest number, the largest value, and output or return that corresponding respective value. So since the result, basically the value that we're outputting back to in the problem, since that actually may be very large, we actually have to return that answer in a string basically instead of an integer, right? So basically we don't overflow the data based on how large that output value can actually get, right? So before I actually go on into examples, I actually just want to say that this actually is the daily problem or the special Leetcode challenge problem on Leetcode, and so I thought it would be a great video to go over of this problem. So in example 1, we have a nums input array of 10, 2, and so we'd output the string of 210 because that is of course the largest element that we can form from these corresponding elements within my input array nums. And applying that same logic in example 2, we'd output the string of 9, 5, 3, 4, 3, 3, 0 because that is the largest value or integer that we can form with every single element in this input array nums, right? So I'll give you guys a few seconds to kind of just go over this problem in your head and think of a solution. And if you guys can't think of a solution, that's completely fine. I will tell you guys how I would optimally solve this problem in a few seconds. Okay, so before we actually start sorting or processing through the input array nums, I actually first just want to convert every single element in my nums input array to a string. And this is actually going to make it a million times easier to actually compare the values that they essentially form in my resolution string that I'll ultimately return to check which value actually forms a larger element or a larger integer. Right? And of course the return type that I'm doing in this function is actually going to be a string, and so it's always a lot better to keep it the same data type. And so the way I'm going to do this in Python is I'm going to set nums basically equal to the mapping, right, with the map keyword basically equal to the string and of course nums. And I'll convert this entire operation into a list, basically an iterable of all of these string concatenations of these different elements in the nums input array. So what this actually does is it basically converts each integer like I talked about before in the nums list to a string using the map keyword function, and it simply wraps that result into a list to ensure that it's actually converted back to a list of strings. And this is actually very important because we actually have to perform string-based comparisons to arrange the numbers in a way that actually forms the largest concatenated result that we will ultimately output or store in a variable resolution or final or whatever we like to call it. Basically the variable that we're going to ultimately return that stores that largest string integer value. So once I've actually done this, I actually want to sort my nums input array, or in this case list, based on those corresponding larger values from largest to greatest to actually form that largest possible input string. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say nums. I'll use the dot sort keyword. And so I can't just dot sort it like that because it's not actually going to sort it correctly. It'll just sort it from least to greatest, which of course in this case we don't want. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass in a key, right? Basically the key keyword in sorting functions. And I'm actually going to use a lambda function in this case for the sorting function. And I'm going to say lambda x, with x being multiplied 10 times. And I'll set the reverse keyword equal to true. So if you guys are not Python frequent users, this is going to seem very foreign and very, very weird to you. So I'm going to explain how this is. So basically lambda is basically an anonymous function that basically has an x variable that it's looking at, and the x variable is simply going to represent all the different elements in the nums input list. So a lambda function basically is applied to each element x in the list, and it basically multiplies x, which in this case is going to be a string, as denoted by line 3 of the code, by 10, right? And that creates a long string version of the number. Like, for example, if x was the string of 9, it multiplied by 10 to be 9999999, or basically 9 times 10 times. And this actually helps with string comparisons by ensuring that all the smaller numbers are treated fairly in the sorting process. For example, if x in one case was 3, 4, let's just say 3, 4, and x plus 1 in the x plus 1 indice, let's just say was 9, even though 9 actually has a higher digit value, the Python interpreter could actually misinterpret this and put 3, 4 ahead of 9 and simply sort it incorrectly. And so if you were to actually multiply these strings by 9, it output to 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4, and this would be 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9. And now it's a lot easier to tell that, hey, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9 is a lot greater than 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4 by simply comparing their respective units' digits and so on and so forth, right? And that is basically ensuring that all of our string comparisons is going to be completely correct and optimized so that we actually optimally have the largest possible string integer value stored in a resolution array, or string rather, right? And so what the reverse equals true keyword does is it basically sorts the list in descending order, ensuring that the largest numbers actually come first, which is ultimately how we're going to add them to our resolution variable, which is what we're going to return. So I'm going to set a resolution, or res, equal to the .join method, again, not a very common keyword in other languages, and I'm going to pass in nums as my parameter. And this simply, what this basically does is it joins all of the elements of the sorted nums list into a single string, and the method basically concatenates all the elements without any separator, forming the largest possible number as a string in the most optimal way possible. And so ultimately, I can simply return res, but there is actually a base case that I have to have, right? And that is going to be the following. I'll have a conditional here just so it's a little bit more readable. I'll say if res at that 0th index, right? If it's actually equal to 0, what I have to do is I simply literally just need to return 0. Simply return 0. Otherwise, if that criteria is not actually true, only then can I actually return res. And unless I made any syntax errors here, this should be completely fine. And as you can see, okay, let's see what I did wrong here. If res at 0 is equal to 0, return. Okay. Okay, so this should actually be a string 0 rather than the actual value itself. And so now this should be completely correct. And as you can see, it is just about as efficient as you can get, with its runtime complexity-wise not only being in 44 milliseconds, but it also being big O of log n times n, right? Because we actually have to sort the array, which takes big O of log n time, where n is its length of the input array nums. And n, because we actually have to map every single element in our nums input array to a string, and also because we are actually using this Lambda anonymous function to iterate through every single value or element within our nums input array, and actually multiply that string concatenation 10 times. And so hence, like I said before, the runtime complexity would be big O of log n times n. And memory-wise, we really only have one extra data structure, and so this would be big O of n, where n is basically the length of the input array nums. And so before I actually end this video, just to kind of recap of what the overall code actually does is, this code basically initially defines a method which rearranges a list of the integers to form the largest possible number when actually concatenated. First, we'd convert the list of integers into strings so that the string concatenation can actually be used to compare the numbers. Then we'd actually sort the string in such a way that concatenating them forms the largest number. And this is achieved by actually just comparing repeated versions of each string multiplied by 10 and sorting that in descending order. Then we actually just use a string.join method, which is basically just join the sorted numbers into a single string. And we actually have to handle the special case where all the numbers are just zeros. For example, if we had a list of just 0, 0, 0, we'd simply just return the string of 0 because the result is obviously just going to be 0. And so the largest number that we can actually form is just 0. And so that's the conditional that we have on line 6. Right? And finally, of course, we simply return the largest possible number as a string, which is stored in our res or resolution variable. But of course, we have that base case if res at the 0th index is actually equal to 0. That means all the others are also going to be 0, because if one number starts at 0 and it's the largest number possible, all the others are just going to be smaller and smaller, are basically 0 as well. And so we simply output the string of 0. Otherwise, if it's not the case, we can simply return res because we've actually found a non-zero maximum or largest number. So if you guys enjoyed this video and learned something new, please consider liking this content and subscribing to my channel. It really does mean a lot. And I know all of this code does look pretty nasty, and it is kind of difficult to understand if you're not actually a native Python user. You can convert this into a language or just paste it into ChatGPT for an explanation. And yeah, without further ado, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.